Hello! So I recently made a video about the themed queer summer reading that I did this summer as a kind of project, and I mentioned that I'd be doing a number of videos about the themes that I noticed within the books that I was reading. So today the theme that I'm going to be focusing on is wealth and how I saw different characters' wealth impacted their journeys as queer individuals within the books that I've read. We're going to start off with The Well of Loneliness by Radcliffe Hall. This follows our main character, Stephen Gordon, who is born into a fairly wealthy family. Her family lives on an estate. They own a lot of horses and a lot of cars. They have a number of servants who help them maintain their home and different things. And Stephen is pretty easily influenced, or her journey is very heavily influenced by the wealth that her family has and that she acquires later on in her life. So a little bit about Stephen. From the very beginning, she is a character who is completely uninterested in abiding by the rules and norms that are set up for her gender. So she's very frustrated by what she is supposed to be or how she's supposed to act because she's a girl. She doesn't enjoy wearing dresses. She doesn't want to play with dolls, and immediately we see that she is ostracized by a lot of the people in her community, especially the children her own age. Stephen's father, however, is incredibly dedicated to making sure that his daughter has a happy and fulfilling life for her, so he arranges for her to get an education, which is something that she would have had without discussion had she been born a boy. And he notices that as she's growing older in her early teens, she has this interest in physical fitness and physical training, and so he hires her a gymnast teacher or a fencing teacher so that she can pursue these interests that she has. And these are things that 100% would not be offered to her had she been born in a middle or lower class. So she has the ability and is given the opportunity to follow and participate in these things that aren't seen as very ladylike because of her father's money and his interest in making sure that she's happy. Wealth affects Stephen later in her life as well. As a young woman, in her late teens, she frequents London to go get suits tailored and made for her, and she is out buying really expensive fast cars and learning how to work with cars, and is making these purchases that seem to be overindulgent and careless and reckless, when in reality they are purchases that enable her to feel comfortable in her body and express her gender the way that she's interested in doing so, which is much more masculine. As far as her gender is concerned in the books, in the book, specifically mentioning it, it talks about her as being someone who is somewhat between sexes. We never see her fully comfortable in her body as a woman. She's very frustrated with her body, but also she's never 100% accepted or aligned with the male sex. So this place between the binaries is where Stephen is most comfortable, at least as it states in the book. This book was the first that I picked up in my themed summer reading, and it was the first that started on a small theme that I was noticing of queerness being in higher association with wealthy individuals, and almost as queerness being something that is accepted or understood or defined as something along the lines of an eccentricity allowed to the wealthy, which is really difficult to read, but was something that kept coming up in the books that I read after this, like Orlando, which I'll mention, and Maurice by E.M. Forster. But just that a lot of the individuals that I was reading, and at least in the beginning, were wealthy and well off. So that was, again, The Well of Loneliness by Radcliffe Hall. The next book I want to mention briefly because I'm not quite sure how to word what I noticed within it, and the book is Orlando by Virginia Woolf. So this follows Orlando, who is born as a boy in Elizabethan times. He is running around in Elizabeth's court, and as he ages, he kind of acquires roles of nobility and is set in a pretty high state of class and wealth. However, when he's 36, something happens and he transforms almost mystically into a woman who is not at first associated with this Elizabethan court. So that's as much I want to say plot-wise, because the plot takes a lot of different turns and is really fascinating in the way that it discusses how Orlando's change of gender and Orlando's ability to age in an almost unnatural way. This starts in Elizabethan times and ends in the 1920s, which, when this was published, would have been current times. But the things that I noticed within the shift from male English Orlando to female, less associated, but still English Orlando, what I noticed was a shift from the wealthy nobility to something a little less normalized in Western culture. So Orlando is taken up by a group of Romani people who live a more nomadic life, and it's less associated with money and wealth. And I may not be saying that quite correctly yet, but with that also this more Western, this shift from a more Western society to a more Eastern society. Virginia Woolf is an amazing artist. I'm absolutely astounded by every single work of hers that I've read. And yeah. The next book that I want to mention is Rubyfruit Jungle by Rita Mae Brown. Now this follows our main character Molly Bolt, who was born in the South in America, and it's a coming-of-age story that talks about her growth as someone who realizes pretty quickly that she is attracted pretty exclusively to women. This was a very interesting book to read, thinking about The Well of Loneliness by Radcliffe Hall, because The Well of Loneliness is also a coming-of-age story about an individual who realizes that they are attracted solely to members of their own gender. Stefan in The Well of Loneliness is born into a pretty wealthy stature in English society. Molly Bolt is born into a lower class American family. Grows up in that lower class American society in the South. And whereas Stefan had all of these opportunities to follow her interests because of her family's wealth, Molly didn't. Her family was always pushing her to conform to society's norms of her gender, while she was much more interested in completely ignoring them and pointing out the flaws of female gender norms. And so it was really interesting to read this. I mean, Stephen Gordon and Molly Bolt are very similar characters. They are headstrong and artistic and unapologetic about the way that they portray their gender and their sexualities. In The Well of Loneliness, Stephen Gordon is a writer, and in here, Molly wants to be a filmmaker, and just the relationship between their aspirations and the struggles that they come into context with those are really interesting, and I highly recommend it. The next two books I want to quickly mention portray to this idea of wealth in queer literature and how it affects characters, and the way that wealth works in these books is fairly similar, I found, or the implications of wealth was pretty similar. The first book I want to talk about is The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith. This follows a young woman who's working in a department store during Christmas, and an older woman walks in, and there is an immediate connection, an almost immediate infatuation between these two characters. And the next is Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. This follows our two main characters, one of whom is the daughter of a wealthy gentleman. The other is a urchin in London and kind of living or making her living on the streets through trickery and stealing. This is a work of historical fiction. Anyway, the way that these two books are similar in their dealings of wealth is that both have one character who is wealthy, or at least a bit better off, than another who is either lower or working class and has this greater worry of how to take care of themselves. Similar to Molly Bolt, who was much more worried about how to get food on her plate and keep a house over her head than, say, characters such as Orlando and Stephen Gordon. But these two books discuss the relationship between wealth and two people who are in a relationship or who interact with one of each other and are from differing class statures. So thanks for watching this bit of discussion video about the things that I was noticing in the books that I've been reading for the past couple months. Again, I'm going to do a couple more of these on different topics, such as what I saw in regards to mental health in the books that I was reading, and then also a favorites and a least favorites of this themed reading. If you have anything to add or share about the books that I mentioned today, please feel free to do so in the comments. I'd love to hear. And again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.